Hey guys, hope you're doing okay. Yeah, I wanted to talk about my past cannabis use as a teenager and a young adult, and how I use cannabis today with my legal prescription, because they're both very different. And yeah, just compare the two really. So when I was 14, I started binge drinking and going to pubs and smoking tobacco. And when I went to Spain on holiday in the summer holidays, I met this Spanish guy and we started dating, and he introduced me to hash, or chocolate as they called it, and I absolutely loved it. I just fell in love with it straight away. It just made me feel comfortable in my own skin for the first time in my life, and it just diminished my anxiety and social phobia and stuff like that. And I just really enjoyed being very, very high. And yeah, I actually didn't drink much on that holiday at all because I was smoking instead. And then when I came back to England, I was very lucky because my childhood friend had just moved away. He'd just moved to Oxford and he was dealing, and he basically used to send me fairly large amounts in the post every week on a Friday. I used to get the package, and yeah, it was amazing. And he did that the whole of my school days, really, up until I left home. And I used to smoke a lot. I definitely overused cannabis at the time. So I used to wake up in the morning and I'd have a cheeky spliff out of the window and clog up the gutters with all my spliff ends. And then I'd go to school and I'd go up the fields with my friends in the breaks and lunch times, and any opportunity that we had, we would smoke a spliff or get stoned somehow. And I remember the amount of times that I'd run out of Rizzlers and I'd cobble together a spliff from a drawing paper and Pritt stick, and it was really, really horrid, but it was what we did when we ran out of Rizzlers. We used to make bongs and take those up the fields as well, and yeah, use bongs. And I used to consume it any way I could, really. I used to do hot knives in people's kitchens. I mean, you know, you name it, and we did it. And my use got more and more habitual. So by about the age of 15, I was smoking every day, and I was smoking at every opportunity I could, because basically it helped me cope. I grew up in a really, really abusive family. I was an only child, and both my parents were very abusive on every level possible. And yeah, I was just basically really traumatized, living in a war zone. And until I found cannabis, I was completely struggling. And then when I started smoking hash, it just created this kind of cocoon where I felt like I had like this inner safety and this inner sort of buffer from my abusive family. And it just really helped. It helped my symptoms of, you know, trauma, complex trauma, PTSD, and really helped with my anxiety, and also really helped me sleep as well, because literally the only time I've ever slept properly in my life, throughout the whole of my life, has been when I've been on cannabis. So yeah, I used to sleep really well, and I could cope just about with, you know, with my family situation. And when I left home at 18 to go to uni, it really progressed at that point where I was stealing it myself at the time, just to fund my habit, really. And I was literally chain smoking spliffs from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep. And I did that for years. I used to go to Amsterdam 2 or 3 times a year, and you know, it was great because we could choose what strains we wanted. You know, I would always choose indica strains and strains that were very calming, and kind of avoid the sativa strains. yeah, so that was my sort of cannabis usage. And in the early 90s, hash began to be phased out in the UK pretty much, and I just couldn't get it at all. And weed was coming in more and more. Before this, the only weed that we used to be able to get would be like sort of a very, very dried up sort of Thai weed or something like that, or some sort of homegrown that wasn't very good. And then skunk came in, and the only strain that really I could get for like years was super skunk, and it just didn't do what the hash did for me. It made me edgy, it made me paranoid, it made me really anxious, and it basically didn't have the medicinal qualities for my conditions that I was using the hash for. And I smoked for a few years, but I basically my head got worse and worse, my mental health got worse, and I had to stop in the end. And I'm not saying this to demonise the word skunk, because I think skunk's been used in the media by the government for donkey's years and continues to use it as a weapon to demonise people that enjoy cannabis. I just think it was the wrong strain for me, and the problem with the black market is you don't always get a choice, unlike the medical cannabis market where you can choose your strains. So I, in the end, just had to stop for my own sort of sanity and mental health. And I found it really difficult to stop because I'd smoked, non-stop since I was 14. And by this point I was probably about 25. So I've been smoking many, many years, and it was very difficult for me to stop. But yeah, I did it. My friends and I, we sort of pretty much stopped at the same time. And that was that. And before I stopped, I thought that I would be somebody who would be, if I made it to like 80 or something, that I would be like, smoking my spliffs, from a wheelchair or whatever, in my sofa. I just thought I would never not be someone that didn't consume cannabis. But here I was in my early 20s or mid 20s where I was no longer a cannabis user. And I've got a very addictive personality. I've always found it really difficult to have an off button. I have BPD as well as PTSD. I also have ADHD, and those sort of conditions, they can make you really impulsive. So it's very difficult to find the off button, have that sort of sense of self-control to not overdo things that I'm medicating myself for. So some of the other addictions and behaviours that I've battled with over the years are eating disorders of, all nuances of eating disorders, from anorexia, bulimia, binge eating. In my 20s, I did a lot of raving and a lot of festival going, and I did do a lot of ease. I consumed a lot, and towards the tail end of it, I was literally taking 15 pills in a night, and just had no off button with that. And then again, it was like it had to reach a point where it got really, really bad for me to stop taking ease. And that was because it was just making me really depressed, and I wasn't getting the same feeling as I got when I first started it. And I took other class A's as well. I mean, I took a lot of acid, which, to be honest, I liked hallucinogenics a lot more than I did ease. Although ease were fun and raving was fun, I liked the more spiritual drugs, and I found that hallucinogenics were really insightful in terms of sort of learning about myself and processing stuff, and was just really interesting to me, tripping. But again, I had to give that up because my head got a bit messy. And I've taken a load of coke, even though I never really liked coke because I found it quite soulless, and people get quite ego-y on coke. but I took it because it was around. And the binge drinking kind of on and off kind of continued. And then when I was 29, I got glandular fever and it went into ME. So I had to give everything up by that point, and try and look after my health. So that was me then, with cannabis use and also other drugs and behaviours, all of which I was trying to medicate my mental health at the time, because I didn't have any physical health issues at that point. So I was just purely trying to medicate my mental health. I hadn't been diagnosed with ADHD at that point. I only got diagnosed a few years ago. So I didn't know that, I had ADHD and that could make you quite impulsive. So there was a piece of the puzzle that I didn't really understand about myself with regards to addictive behaviours. But I did know that I had this big void inside of me that, wasn't, where I didn't have good parenting when I was a kid. And I'd cut contact with my parents very early on after I left home. So, it's been quite a lonely old life for me, really. And I've always been looking to fill that void with substances and behaviours that make me feel better, even if it's temporarily. So that was my past behaviour. And then fast forward to the beginning of this year, when I was really reaching the point of not being able to cope with my anxiety anymore. My PTSD was still really bad, and my sleep was just impossible. I was just getting nightmares every night, pretty much, due to my PTSD, and I just couldn't sleep. I've always been a bit of a night owl, but I really just couldn't find that sleep button. And also, as I've said in other videos, that I wanted to come off all the pharmaceuticals that I don't need to save my life, like my steroids and stuff. And I was really like, how am I going to do this without any help? Because coming off morphine, pregabalin, all these drugs is really, really hard. And that was when collectively I just, looked into the cannabis route and, hooked up with a clinic and, got my first cannabis prescription. And I was really, really worried about going down the cannabis route because of my previous cannabis addiction levels, really. I was concerned financially because I don't have money, and it's quite expensive, cannabis on the legal, private legal prescription, and I can't afford to burn through like loads of different strains and overuse it, really, because I just don't have the money for that. But also I just didn't want to be a slave to a substance or a behavior anymore, because I feel like I've sorted out quite a lot of my addictive stuff over the years, and I wanted to not feel like it was ruling the roost. So I was really, really worried about that. And I basically got my script, the second time when I got my flower, and I got a vape and started vaping it. And it's been really fascinating for me that I am able to have a really healthy relationship with cannabis these days. I definitely don't overuse it. I would say that I'm really, really frugal with it. Some days I don't vape at all. Like, I will always use my oil at night time for my insomnia, but some days I don't vape at all in the day or the evening, and I can do that for 2-3 days in a row or something. Some days I will vape more in the evening, and some days I will vape a bit in the day as well. So it really depends, but I feel like I am trying to medicate my symptoms these days instead of trying to get as humanly high as possible, which was what my number one aim was when I was a teenager, really. I just didn't want to feel at all. And when I was a teenager, I would just chain smoke spliffs all day and nighttime, because I didn't like that feeling of the high starting to wear off, and you're creeping back down to being clear-headed. And I really hated that, and I wanted to avoid that at all costs. So I would literally just be chain smoking spliffs just to keep that high going. I'm definitely not doing that now. And it's not to say that I don't enjoy being high, because I do, of course I do. It's an enjoyable thing to do, to consume cannabis. But just that I'm more concerned now about keeping my symptoms at bay, so keeping my chronic pain at bay, keeping my anxiety at bay, helping me sleep, that kind of thing. And I feel like, you know, when you vape cannabis, the high probably lasts, well, between 2 or 3 hours for me, depending on the strain. Some strains last a bit longer. But now I'm comfortable with that high wearing down and just sort of slowly, you know, coming back to a place of clear-headedness, and it's not this kind of panic to keep the high going, which means that I'm consuming a lot less of it. And also, I think that in the previous, when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I smoked spliffs with tobacco, and I really think that that was half the problem. Not all of it, but half of it, because I was constantly topping up my nicotine habit, and it was difficult to separate out, you know, whether I really needed to be that high or whether I, you know, was wanting the nicotine. So it muddied the waters a lot. And now I don't smoke nicotine. I gave up baccy about 4 or 5 years ago. I found out my mum had died of lung cancer, and I was estranged from her, and it was a bit of a shock, so I gave up, and I've stayed stopped. So my advice to anyone who is a cannabis newbie, or somebody like me who used to maybe previously cane it when they were younger and they've had a long period without, and you're getting your script on a private prescription for medical cannabis, and maybe you're worried about you know, going back into old habits and over consuming cannabis, or if you're a cannabis newbie, you might just be scared because of all the media scares of, you know, skunk and, you know, the sort of demonization of cannabis, and you might be worried about addiction. So I just wanted to make this video just to demonstrate that even though I've got a very addictive personality, I'm very impulsive, and I have a lot of mental health symptoms to medicate for, you can still have a healthy relationship with it. It is possible. I'm living proof, and yeah, I just wanted to talk it through, really. I would say that if you are someone that is a baccy smoker or a nicotine smoker, and either you're already smoking spliffs on the, you know, using the legacy market or the black market for your cannabis, or you're not, and you're coming to you've arrived at the place where you've decided you're going to get a cannabis script. My number one piece of advice to all of you nicotine smokers are separate it out from your cannabis, because your wallet will thank you, and you know, you might actually not be needing as much cannabis as you think. I mean, maybe you do, and that's fine, you know, you do you. Whatever you need, whatever you want, you know, it's your body and it's your mind. But you know, if you do want to be, you know, not over consuming it, then if you get a vape and you vape your flower, and you know, smoke your nicotine elsewhere, like, you know, roll your rollies or smoke your straights, but just keep it away from spliffs, keep it out of a spliff, you know, then I think you will really appreciate how much you will save compared to if you're bunging it in a spliff with tobacco. And also, yeah, your wallet will thank you. So that's kind of all I really wanted to say. I hope that's helpful, and if anyone has got any You know, if any of you guys can relate to what I'm saying, if you've been a previous cannabis smoker that's sort of caned it, and you know you want to get a legal cannabis script and be a bit more modified, or you know just your experiences. And I just like reading the comments, and I like to see, you know, yeah, what your individual experiences are. So I hope that's helpful, and yeah, speak soon. Bye.